Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Recovery Project podcast, where a young social worker, me, expands her knowledge of recovery and addiction guided by a social worker who has been in the game for over 25 years.
That's me.
My dad. We're absolutely thrilled to be here, stepping into uncharted territory with this podcast. We're eager to share our conversations with you and learn together. We plan on covering many topics from the psychology of addiction to the effect of substance use disorders have the effect substance use disorders have on families. To start us off, we'll go through some introductions. So, my name is Shauna Moore. I am a 22-year-old who recently got licensed at the bachelor level and is aiming for her clinical license in social work. I truly started my social work journey when I started working at my parents' private practice in the summer after 11th grade. I had no intention of becoming a social worker, for being totally honest. I was gonna go to beauty school. I was gonna be a makeup artist. I was going down this true artistic route. I wasn't even sure. I was in the 8th grade. I was positive, 100% positive, that I was not going to college. I didn't want to go to college. I was like, high school's gonna be a breeze because I don't have to worry about college. That changed in 11th grade because I actually got to see what my parents did, and I got to see what social work actually was. I also learned the word social work for the first time. I actually learned what they did. They were kind of like an enigma. I didn't really know what my parents did, but I got to observe the hard work that they did and the research that they were doing. And even though I was mostly just filing and organizing the office because it was a mess, still is a mess, but maybe a little bit of a better mess. But uh, so I never really got to see in person what they were doing with their clients, but I saw the after effects. I saw many old clients and families coming and saying that they were so thankful and that a lot of gifts and telling them about their son or their daughter or them how much they've been helped and how they're doing great. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. I want to do that. I want to help people get to a spot where they're like, I'm doing I'm doing great, and I have someone to thank for that. Like, I wasn't alone, and I can relate to having someone who was there, my therapist, to help me get through the times when I felt alone. So I was like, okay, I think this might be what I want to do. And so I started my journey, and I started my college search in 11th grade, having thought that I was never going to go to college. So that was kind of my journey. Lastly, just for a little fun information about me, I'd like to say that I am a Sagittarius. My
Hmm.
Enneagram number is a 5, and my favorite color is yellow. So, now that I've finished my very long introduction, I would like to introduce the man, the myth, the legend, my dad, Steve Moore.
Well, thanks. That's a very nice introduction. So I have a question for you. Do you feel like we put pressure on you to come into our business?
No, not at all. I mean, y'all constantly told me that you were very okay if I didn't, and that, like, if y'all ended up closing down, like, that would have been fine. I never felt any pressure at all. Like, I went into social work knowing that I had all the options in the world to not continue what you did. And you've continued that
Well,
notion.
I guess that's the answer I would hope for. So that's probably the answer I would wish that you would
I
give.
know, right?
Although I'm excited. I'm
Hmm.
excited that you're doing it, and I'm glad that you're doing it. I appreciate having this opportunity to talk about what we do. So to start with, I'm an LSCSW, which is a licensed independent clinical social worker.
Independent. I didn't know what
Yes.
the I was. I
Yeah,
never knew what the I
right,
was.
right. That just means that private practice. You can practice. It
Oh.
used to be a private independent practitioner, which I also am.
Oh.
But it just means that I'm licensed at this level, so that I can practice, privately, do clinical work. And I've been licensed at that level. That's the 25 years
Oh.
that you use. So I've probably been in the field more like 30 years,
Hmm.
but licensed at this level for that long. And we incorporated the Moore Institute, 25 years ago, the private practice that you keep referring to.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I've been doing this for a long time, now, or at least it feels like a long time,
Hmm.
that I've been doing this.
Yeah.
It got started, when I was in treatment. That's the place that it really began because when I first got sober
Mm-hmm.
was January of 1990. So January of,
Aging yourself.
I know, January of 1990, I went to treatment. And in treatment, I aspired to being a thing called a volunteer aftercare facilitator,
Okay.
continuing care facilitator, which I still have a certificate for that I'm very proud of to this day, that I learned how to do that. So I started facilitating these weekly aftercare groups like within 2 years.
Of being
And
sober?
yes, yes. But
Oh.
it was an important part of my recovery journey that
Oh.
I aspired to that I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
do well and wanted to be involved. That I wanted to help uh, and to be a part of the process of other people's recovery. And
Mm-hmm.
so I learned how to facilitate groups very early on
Mm-hmm.
from the people who trained that in the treatment center that I was in. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even think they do that, anymore, right? But at that time you could do it, and I really enjoyed it. So
Mm-hmm.
every week I was facilitating this aftercare group, and I was doing that when I met your mother. I met your mother then a little bit later, after I'd already started doing that, and she was in the master's program for social work and was already working in a treatment center.
Mm-hmm.
So your mom was already finishing her degree, the degree that you're getting now.
Right.
So she was in a master's program, and she was already working in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was doing the volunteer facilitating, everybody sort of thought I was too. Now I was selling computers.
Oh. Oh, you were still doing that?
Right. When I met your mother, I was still in the computer business.
Oh.
Right. So I was still
You were still a tech guy.
right, right, because that was my first little degree that I
Uh-huh.
had was an associate's in electronics, which is what I thought I wanted to do with my life.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd always been interested in electronics.
I did know
That's
that.
why I'm an early adopter of electronic gizmos and stuff like that, because that stuff has always been of interest to me.
Oh.
Science fiction,
Yeah.
right?
I guess
So,
I never really connected those two.
right.
But
So,
that makes sense.
so that's why all that stuff really interests me. But that's what I was doing when I met your mom.
Hmm.
But people assumed that I was a counselor too, right?
Really?
Because I was hanging out with your mom, and I was doing that group, and so people kind of thought that I was, and would always be surprised when I said that I was in sales, right? Because that's what I really was. I wasn't a technical guy in the computer business. I sold these systems.
Right.
Sales engineer.
You were like the preppy guy who was like, here's this
Well,
or buy this.
sort of like that. I'm the guy who can take technical terms,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sort of the guy that translates between the truly technical guys and the other folks.
Oh, you're like the
Right,
middleman.
right.
Oh, that's
Which
interesting.
is probably still what I am.
Yeah, I guess that is true. Did you ever get certified or like training to do that? Did you just
Well,
like start? Did they just here's the job and you got training for that?
I did.
Okay,
I
I was
did.
just wondering if they just gave you that job too. It was like here's this.
Well, well, almost. It was if you had stayed sober and
Mm-hmm.
had been doing well in attendance and
Oh,
continuing
uh-huh.
care, they offered you this training, which was 2 weekends of basically how not to mess people up.
Oh,
How to keep the group going.
okay.
Don't give advice or tell people what to do.
Oh,
You
that's
know,
good. At least if they were saying that from the very beginning,
right
that's
from the
good.
beginning, which didn't stop me, but
Oh.
it was good advice. It was good advice. Because by the time I had been sober 2 years, I was
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure I was an expert.
Oh, you thought you knew
I
everything.
did. I did. And why wouldn't you think that?
I guess that's true.
You know,
2 years is a long time, I
two
guess.
years is a long time. And so I'd been continuously sober and doing pretty well for 2 years. And so I thought I knew a lot. I'd spoken out of town as far away as Pell City, Alabama. So
You spoke?
I did.
You s-
I
Whoa.
did.
What did
And
you speak on?
well, in the 12-step programs, which
Okay.
is what the treatment that I was in was based on,
Mhm.
and I went to the program called Alcoholics Anonymous, and so
Mhm.
in that program, sometimes you're asked by people to tell your story. It's
Oh,
called a speaker meeting.
okay.
Yeah, and sometimes you're asked by people to do that. And because I was facilitating this aftercare group, a lot of people knew me and knew that I had been around for a while, and it sort of made me seem like I was somebody. And so that would
Oh.
get me invitations to come and speak, at these speaker meetings, right?
That's
And
cool.
that's why I told you, I have a story, a recovery story about my sobriety, and I told you that my story is true, and some of it really happened.
Mm-hmm.
I have a great story. There's parts of it I'm not completely sure exactly happened, but they're pretty close.
It sounded cool enough for the story.
It was, and the part about me getting sober is accurate.
Yes. Right, right, right.
That part is pretty true. I called my sponsor in the 12-step programs. One time I was on my way to out of town, this place called Silicaga,
Mm-hmm.
to speak. And I
You
told him,
went
I
out
said,
far.
this part of my story, I'm not sure if it's mine or yours. I can't really remember it anymore. And he just laughed at me and said, it no longer makes any difference.
Really?
You're sharing your experience, strength, and hope,
And that's what
but so
matters.
that other people, can get better. And he was just laughing at me. And I can't even remember what it was about. I really don't.
That's so interesting. The fact that you ended up with a story that had some parts that were the truth and other parts were like, well, maybe it could have happened.
Good for that. Well, probably if I told it now, it's been a long time, but probably if I told it now, I'd probably be pretty accurate. At
Mm-hmm.
that time, it was uh, partially entertainment,
Ah,
but mostly it was more like preaching a sermon. It was sort of like so folks would know that it was possible to get better.
okay.
They want to hear a story that they can relate to, that and really it wasn't that I was lying.
Mm-hmm.
But a story that they can relate to that says I've been there
Mm-hmm.
and I've done that,
Mm-hmm.
and so I am one of you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what it was like,
Mm-hmm.
but here's what's happened and what it's like now.
Okay.
Right. So you get to hear a story that says that there's a transformational process that is possible.
Mm-hmm.
I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so you're telling a story that sounds like that. You know,
Okay.
and my story was pretty traditional.
Okay.
We are, you know, we don't think completely this way now, but my story was
Right.
very traditional. I got out of treatment and went to meetings,
Mm-hmm.
went to aftercare,
Mm-hmm.
got a sponsor, worked the
Mm-hmm.
steps. That's how I got sober and stayed sober.
So you were like the poster child of how it's supposed to to work?
Which is statistically
Uh-huh.
unusual,
Oh.
but it is the way that we advertise it, or
Mm.
we in the treatment business.
Yeah, okay.
We advertise that you hit a bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You are exposed to usually through a treatment process.
Uh-huh.
You're exposed to these 12-step programs. Then you go to meetings
Uh-huh.
and you get a sponsor and you work the steps. And through this process of involvement in this
Uh-huh.
program is how you maintain sobriety,
Huh.
abstinence from the ingestion of substances. And that is what I did do.
Right.
But as you've probably heard me say more than once, what that makes me is a statistical outlier.
Right.
It's an unusual,
Oddity.
yeah, it is. It's an unusual outcome. It happens. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
certainly not the only one. Your mom did too.
But she also didn't quite do it the way that you did it either. She also did it kind of in a pretty. She went through like what 9 sponsors, so she kind of had like
That's
a
true.
funky path too.
She did. She had a more unusual pathway,
Uh huh.
which is part of what got us interested in
What you do now,
what
which
we
we
do
will
now.
talk about. We will talk about your private practice, and we'll talk about the Moore Institute. We've prefaced a lot of things, but we'll definitely get to that. Um. So when did you go to school? When did you get like? Because I know that my mom did first, and then she worked, and then she started working. Where were you within this timeline?
Well, I was working for a guy in a computer business,
Mhm.
and I really was not doing particularly well. I had done, okay, off and on.
Mhm.
I'd gotten, divorced, and your mom and I had met,
Mhm.
and we had gotten together. Then she graduated
Mhm.
after I met her. The spring after I met her, she graduated and got her sort of first real master's level job,
Okay.
and she had been encouraging me to take classes.
Okay.
She was encouraging me, to go back to school, and I
Mhm.
wasn't sure that I could. I
Oh.
really wasn't sure that I was able to get into school, but with your mom's encouragement, I decided to try.
Why didn't you think you could get in?
Well, I wasn't sure that I could afford to.
Oh, okay. That
I
makes
wasn't
sense.
sure that I was qualified to. I
Oh.
wasn't sure that I was smart enough to. I was afraid that I had messed up my brain, knowing
Really?
that I might not be able to do school. Uh,
Oh.
but I did take this one class.
Mhm.
It was a women's studies class by a professor named Becky Trigg that your mom remembered and had liked, and she thought I would like the class, and I really did. But about halfway through that class that I was engaged in and doing well in, my boss fired me. Uh,
Do you know why?
well, I wasn't doing very well.
Oh.
I wasn't doing very well. I hadn't been for a while. The divorce had taken a toll, an emotional
Oh.
toll on me,
Okay,
and I
okay.
wasn't very interested in it anymore. So I wasn't
Really?
trying very hard.
Okay.
Uh, so here I was, about halfway through this summer class, and I had gotten fired. And your mom said, if you want to go back to school full time, I think we can do it.
As long as you stop smoking.
She did. I was still smoking cigarettes at the time, which was expensive, and she did tell me I had to stop smoking cigarettes, which I did. Um, and the lady who had been in charge of group therapy that I was in
Mhm.
had started a new program at the university at UAB, where you got
Okay.
your undergraduate.
Mhm.
She had started a new program called the Addiction Recovery Program in the Department of Psychiatry, and I knew she was down there and
Mhm.
doing that. And so I asked for an appointment, went to see her, and asked if she would hire me. She knew me from the group and from
Mhm.
doing the continuing care program, and she said she would. She said she'd give me a job, but it was like a tech job, like
Oh.
$6.34 an hour.
Wait, how much was?
$6.34 an hour. I remember how much I was making,
That's crazy.
and it
And it
was
hasn't gone up very much since then.
well,
Anywho.
so I got that hourly job, which took a while to get. I mowed yards for a little while and
Uh-huh.
painted and stuff for a little while your mom's really supported us.
That's okay. Wow.
Mostly through school. Your mom, I was making money, but clearly wasn't making enough money.
Yeah.
And so I had to go, and remember, I only had an associate's degree, so I had to start from zero from my freshman
Oh.
year. So it took me 5 years to get my degree from 94 to 99.
Oh, I didn't think about
Mm-hmm.
that. Oh my
So
gosh.
I worked as a tech, uh, but I was in a great position because it was a startup program. These folks that had hired me ended up liking me.
Mhm.
And because I was older and had been, in
Mhm.
recovery for a while and been
Mhm.
doing, they kind of turned me loose and let me do more.
They just turned you loose?
Right. A lot of the lectures
Uh-huh.
some of the things you hear me doing
Yeah.
to this day are lectures that I developed then for the addiction recovery program, or some variations on them. I've learned
Wow.
a few things since then, and it's changed over time.
Oh, I'd hope so.
But that's how I got started. I was working nights and weekends.
So,
Uh,
did you ever I, internship? Like,
well, I
did you
did.
have someone who was like you would go to be like, yeah, I messed up. What do I do?
Well, in recovery stuff,
Mhm.
I did have, of course, supervisors who worked
Mhm.
there, but they weren't in recovery. They were
Oh.
good counselors and good people, and so they could talk to me about counseling, but about
Mhm.
recovery stuff, again, I was burdened with thinking that I knew a lot,
Mhm.
and so about how to talk about to people about recovery, I thought I knew.
How
Uh,
to do that?
I did think I knew how to
Oh.
do that. So I was learning about counseling, more than anything else,
Mhm.
and I was getting through school so that I could get in supervision. And I had some good social work supervision. While I was there,
Mhm.
I worked in psychiatric intensive care. I worked in open psychiatry. I worked in adolescent psychiatry. I
Oh.
worked in open just means that you can leave.
Oh. Okay.
Psychiatric intensive care, the door's locked. You don't get to leave
Oh.
if you want to.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Mhm.
I didn't know that was a thing. Well,
Right,
okay, that's interesting.
right. And so, so I worked in all levels of psychiatry while I was there, during school.
Mhm.
So I learned a lot, from doing that. That's where I learned how to do biopsychosocial assessments so fast, which I
Oh.
guess we'll talk about at some point along the
Yeah.
way.
Were you the only one? Not, I guess maybe not the only one, but like in recovery. Like, was there anyone else that you were working with that was in recovery that you could like? Because it sounds like you were working with a lot of like counselors and therapists that weren't in recovery. Were you like the only one in recovery, and you're like, I don't know, in this job?
Well, that's why actually this person, her name was Carol Finland. That's why she had hired me. She had hired me
Oh.
because they needed somebody in recovery because the entire staff that had gotten hired up until then were good counselors.
Uh-huh.
I learned a lot from some of the folks that were there, but from the medical director on down,
That no
none of
one.
them were in recovery. So they hired me, and so I'm a sales guy, you
Mhm.
know, with by that point some years of recovery, who had thought he was already a counselor because I had been doing this aftercare
Mhm.
group. Oh my, I got loose in there and I started designing things and designing night programs and weekend programs and a series of lectures, you know, that I was doing, uh, and and that actually got kind of famous down there
Oh my
from
gosh.
having done them so much, and it was fun. To me, it was fun because in the way that I had not been into sales anymore, or into the computer, I was into this. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I was into learning about it and into trying to help people. I thought I could make a difference. You know, I'm still burdened with that now. Part of why we're having this conversation is because I still think I can make a difference
Right.
and still think that I can help people. You hear that in me
Yeah.
when we're talking to folks that we're working with. And
Yeah.
so then I was on fire.
I didn't know you had such a big part in that program.
Well, I did because they absolutely let me, you know, work on
Loose.
it. They did. They did. When we opened, I helped them to open this unit, and your mother had taken a training uh, on this thing called the Developmental Model of Recovery. A guy named Terry Gorski, who
Okay.
we still use some of his
Yeah.
stuff, you know, today. So she had taken this training program at the place that she had been working. And so I had all of this information, all the notebooks from that, and I was the only one that had it. Nobody else had taken that training. So I had all of this information. So they let me design the way it was called the Recovery Stabilization Unit, which
Oh.
was from this particular thing. We named it that.
Uh-huh.
And they let me write a lot of the way that it was going to work, uh, but because I guess I had these ideas,
Uh-huh.
you know, that came from there. So essentially, because I didn't know what I didn't know, and I
Mhm.
guess neither did they.
Mhm.
uh, we but we did it together. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
I
That's
didn't
good.
do it by myself. But when she hired me,
Uh-huh.
she said, "Steve, I'm going to give you a job, but there's
Okay.
two rules. So I want you to wear a tie every day, and don't let your hair grow down to your ass." Those are the two instructions that she gave me. So I started wearing a tie every day and immediately started letting my hair grow. And so my hair's been long ever since Carol told me. Ever since she gave me that instruction, I've had long hair. Because those are the two instructions she gave me, and I followed one, which is the way I follow
I was
instructions.
about to say, I was like,
But
that's.
what I didn't know
Mhm.
was that in the hospital setting, a
Mhm.
tie gives you authority. A man wearing a tie in the hospital setting at that time looks like somebody who's in charge of something.
A tie?
Hmm.
Did it depend on the tie?
It did because only doctors wore ties. Nurses did not.
Oh.
And
So it was
physical
like a
therapists and occupational therapists, the only people who wore ties actually were physicians. If you were a PhD or an MD, you know, wore a tie, nobody else did. And so I didn't know this, but Carol had me started wearing a tie, and so I walked around. Everybody thought I was in charge of something.
Oh my gosh, did it matter what if it had a design? Did it
Oh, I wore nice ties. You know your mother, so
Well,
I.
I know you had you still have a lot of them. They're really fancy. But I had no idea that was a thing.
Well, I didn't either. I didn't either.
But she just told you to
Carol just gave me the instruction when she hired me. She said, I'm gonna hire you.
but she
Two
needed to,
things.
two things.
Two things. Always wear a tie, and don't let your hair grow down to your ass. Everybody who becomes a counselor lets their hair grow out.
Really?
That's what she thought.
I've never seen any other therapist with long hair or male
But the only
therapist.
reason actually my hair is long is because your mother likes it.
Yeah, that's what I was. I knew that, but I was thought that was the weirdest instruction. Uh, that and of course you only
But
followed
that's
one
how
of
I
them.
learned a lot. How
Yeah.
I learned a lot of what we did. Your mom had worked inside a treatment center
Mhm.
and you know had been an addiction counselor, and then she went on to do some other things before she went into private practice.
Mhm.
that were more administrative, which is why she sort of runs our companies now.
Right.
And I worked on the clinical side of things at the addiction recovery program until after I got my degree, and
Mhm.
then I started working in private practice as well too, while I went on to another role for the university that I worked in for a while.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about because I remember you said that a big part of your well, the one thing that I actually remember and thought that was the only thing you did was the pharmacy something to
Right,
do with pharmacy?
right. The program that I was working in was it was really designed for healthcare professionals, and
Okay. Oh,
so
okay.
doctors and nurses and pharmacists, and so we treated a lot of healthcare professionals. That was sort of the goal of this particular treatment
Oh, that we're
program.
struggling with substance use.
Exactly.
Oh, that was your clientele. That's what it was.
Right. Our client base, it wasn't that we didn't accept other people,
Right.
we did, but the client base was really for doctors and nurses, for people who worked within healthcare who had gotten in trouble. And we considered that to be a specialty or a
Mhm.
subspecialty of at that time, addiction
Uh-huh.
field, special problems
Mhm.
that they have that are associated with that. And I was really good with that,
Yeah.
good at talking to people like that. And so they had a contract with the Alabama State Board of Pharmacy. So
Okay.
this is the board that licensed pharmacists and technicians, and
Uh-huh.
so to help manage their program for
Okay.
their folks who got in trouble. Now we were doing treatment, so we were
Okay.
but this is for everybody in the state of Alabama.
Okay.
If you're a licensed pharmacist or technician and you got in trouble, somebody had to sort of manage your care,
Okay.
where you were going to go and what was going to happen after you got out. Somebody had to manage that,
And that was you.
and that was me. I did that for 10 years. But I
Oh.
did it under contract through UAB,
Okay.
through the place that I had been working. So I was still employed by the university.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was doing, but I was managing the impaired pharmacist program for the Alabama State Board of Pharmacy.
So you did that first program and then you did this?
Yes.
What transition? What how because those seem like I mean, the same thing with substance use, but like how do you go from that to that?
Well, I was phasing out of my role in the treatment program.
Okay.
I had gone to part time, and I was
Oh.
working in the Moore Institute in the private practice.
Oh, okay, you'd already started it by then.
I had
Or y'all had.
so it was 2099 is when I got my license. 2001 is when I started this role. So I was already phasing out when this opening came up
Mhm.
to do this.
Mhm.
So I went back in and started doing that, but I was beginning to leave my role inside the treatment center. And I never stopped completely
Uh-huh.
until I retired out of there, until I
Mhm.
stopped at the University Treatment Center. I would go back and do this series of lectures.
Yeah, you've talked so hold on. So getting my timeline right.
Mm,
So you were still doing the pharmacy thing while working on the Moore Institute?
yes, for
So
a
you
long time.
really?
Hmm.
So you had formed when did you form the Moore Institute?
1999.
Oh.
I mean, as soon as I got my license, we incorporated the Moore Institute. Your mom had already been in private practice, but as an individual practitioner. So she was just a sole practitioner with her license, and so she was
Oh.
just like Pam Moore,
Okay.
you
Okay.
know.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And but we incorporated the Moore Institute as soon as I got my license,
Gotcha.
and so that's why it was formed in 1999, and why it's
Gotcha.
25 years old. At the time we're doing this.
Mhm.
And so that's how it went. Is during those first 10 years or so, I was doing two jobs. I would work for the Alabama State Board of Pharmacy, managing theirs, but that's not like a 9 to 5 job. That's not a
Okay.
regular hour job. That's a when things come up and you have to manage it as you go. So I
Oh.
could do the private practice at the same time.
Oh, I did not know those overlapped so
Mm-hmm.
much.
For a long time, because I didn't stop doing that until 2011,
Oh my gosh.
right? And so we didn't form the group that you've been seeing, the
Right.
intensive that we'll probably talk about more, until after I'd stopped doing that.
Oh. That
And
is
just getting all kinds of interesting information about how this happened,
it
right?
is because you've talked about the farms. I thought you were some sort of pharmacist. like because you know so much about medication and
Um,
like weirdly and all the names and like what they do and I'm just like so I just assumed that you did some sort of pharmacy training and that you were
well,
sort of a
I actually
pharmacist.
did.
You did?
When I was, I worked inside a pharmacy for years when I was a teenager.
You d-
So
oh
from the
wow.
time I was 17 until I was about 20, I worked for an independent pharmacist.
How did that happen?
Well, just a strange series of events. And I want you to know that being a young drug addict, getting a job at a pharmacy is not the best
I was
idea.
about to say it doesn't that like overlap.
It does have its problems.
Yeah.
It does have its problems.
Interesting.
There,
Okay.
not far from my house, I had
Okay.
been working in a TV repair shop. Next door to it was a pharmacy, and I knew the pharmacist, and I knew these guys. We became friends, and they offered me a job. And he taught me how to be what I now know as a pharmacy technician, which is a person who can fill prescriptions and do a whole lot of things
Uh-huh.
under the supervision
Of the
of a
pharmacist.
pharmacist. But for all practical purposes, he taught me how to be a pharmacist. He
Really?
taught me how to run the pharmacy. Now, not the pharmacists have to study a lot. They have to
Yeah.
understand a lot of things that I do not know.
Right.
But I ended up knowing a lot about
Just the
drugs.
experience.
Right, and I'm a fast reader,
Yes.
and
It's scary.
I acquired these things called physician's desk references. It's just it used to be the Bible of all the drugs that were available,
Whoa.
and which I still have today. I'll show you one sometime.
I have to see
It's
this.
still in the library, which I study. But so I would know what I was talking about when I was talking to people about the
Oh.
prescriptions that they were getting and those sorts of things.
Uh-huh.
And so I ended up learning a lot about it. Then by the time I went to work for the pharmacy board, I just knew a lot. And so by the time I went to work there, pharmacists and pharmacy technicians, when I talked to them about what it was like to work and do their job, well, I had done their job.
That's crazy that like worked out the way that it did. A lot of ways that's really cool that you were able to do that. That made you like did you do that because of that past experience or was it just a job opening that you thought would be interesting? Like why did you choose that job?
Well, it was a way that I could stay employed by the
Uh-huh.
university while doing the private practice. And so it was an
Oh.
opportunity.
Mhm.
And then once I got in there, I just really liked a
Mhm.
lot of it. I really liked.
Mhm.
I really enjoyed working with the pharmacist. I really enjoyed working, but there's a lot of politics,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
in the
Yeah.
pharmacy board. I didn't love all of that,
Mm.
particularly, but I enjoyed working with the people.
Mhm.
Uh, it was bad for me clinically, uh,
Bad for you clinically?
right? Because I had a lot of power. And by that, what I mean is when people with a license get in trouble, you can tell them what to do, and they have to do it. And that's not if they want to keep their license.
Okay.
If they and For that reason, it hurt my ability to establish rapport, to convince people that this is what would be better for them. At the beginning, I was still doing all of that, but by the time I had done it for a long time, I would just say, if you want to be a pharmacist ever again, you're just going to do what I say, essentially. And you're going to
Oh.
go this treatment center, you're going to do these things, you're going to sign these things, and
So
so
you never built like a relationship on like
by the end, the power it had just gotten where I would just sort of tell people what they were going to have to do because that's where we were going to get to anyway. Let's just skip to the end. You're going to have to do this if you want to practice pharmacy ever again, and which is the way a lot of people are put into treatment now. Is
right.
there's some sort of coercion?
Yeah.
They must do it, and which I don't consider to be good clinically
And cuz you've done it
because I've done it. I've done it both ways.
and
I,
it didn't and you saw that it didn't work
I
or that it
saw that
hurt?
it is not, it has negative side effects.
Okay.
It's like telling somebody that they need to get in shape and they know they need to get in shape,
Uh-huh.
but then you make them go to the gym at gunpoint.
Oh.
They might get in shape, but
But
the
they're not going to be
negatives,
happy about it.
well, they've been to the gym at gunpoint.
And so they're traumatized.
Right. So the side effect is that the coercion or the
Mhm.
leverage that we used to cause them to do it.
Mhm.
Maybe they've gotten in better shape, and maybe eventually they get where they like the
Mhm.
gym or want it or are glad that they did it. But you can never erase the side effect of the leverage and coercion.
Mm.
And so I don't consider it to be a good thing, even though a lot of people, that's the way they first get introduced into any sort of
Yeah.
treatment processes because, DUI or in trouble and
Mhm.
something.
That is so interesting. So, and you were seeing clients as well, and
I was, and it's why, by the way, you don't hear us using any form of coercion and leverage today in
right,
our clinical process and treatment
they
process.
do what they wanted.
Absolutely, and
Uh-huh.
it's
And you're
why
just here to support them.
absolutely, and it's why you hear us. We call our thing the no rules place.
Yeah.
Because we want to give as much choice as possible, and we want to see if we can. Build rapport
Mhm.
and cause people to want,
Mhm.
what is available.
Mhm.
And that's why you hear us doing it the way we're doing it. So, which sometimes you must wonder, why don't you just,
I
make people
do.
do right?
But so you were seeing clients and doing the pharmacy job, and then you retired. Did you choose to retire? Like, why did you
Well,
retire?
not exactly. I'd been doing it for 10 years, and
It's
the
a long
contract,
time.
yeah, the contract for the board came up for renewal, and there was a new manager in the program down at UAB,
Mhm.
uh, and somehow through a combination of events, the contract ended up not getting renewed.
Oh.
They wanted more money, and they wanted less money, and I had made all kinds of bad political moves because I didn't like working with the attorney. The attorney liked to make people do things, and on the one hand, I would make them do what I wanted them to do, but I didn't want the attorney to make them do it, so I would protect them. So I was in the middle, protecting them from consequences, uh, at the board level. So
Oh.
anyway, it caused me to make some political enemies at the board, and I made some enemies at
Oh.
UAB. So by the time this contract renewal thing came up, the contract ended up not getting renewed. So UAB lost the contract with the State Board of
Oh
Pharmacy.
my goodness.
So I could still have a job, but I was going to have to come back inside the treatment center. So I was going to have to come back in, work back in treatment again, and I said no to that. So uh, they dissolved my position, and I was qualified for retirement.
Oh, that's good.
I had been down there for 17 years by then.
Jeez. Oh my
I
gosh.
know, and so I'd been down there for long enough to qualify for retirement, so I just took early retirement.
Wow. So that's political enemies.
Oh, I'm actually good at making political enemies.
Oh, that's that's so interesting to hear that you made political enemies and on the board and at UAB, and that's how you ended up leaving the
Yeah,
job.
yeah, I'm actually pretty good at that.
That's crazy. But you did it protecting the person.
Well, yes, um,
That's the best kind.
yes. Mostly what I was trying to do is the way that it was structured. Um, if if the way it was structured, people had to sign a contract for 5 years
Jeez.
to
Okay.
be monitored with drug screens and in order to be able to practice pharmacy again.
Oh, okay. Well, then I guess that's good.
And what a lot of times what they wanted to do is not allow some people to do that and allow other people to do that. And I didn't think it was based on clinical factors. I
Oh,
thought it was based on whether or not they were liked, or a lot of different things affected
a lot of
that
variables that
that I
shouldn't have
didn't.
been considered.
That's what I thought. And so my rule was that if you would do what I ask, which is go to treatment and sign this contract, you got to go back to work. And the only way you could mess it up is if you got a bad drug screen. Other
Mm.
than that, you if you meet the letter of the law,
Mhm.
you're going to get to practice, again.
Mhm.
And so the deal I would try to make with people is that's going to happen.
Okay.
Now, if you and I can engage, that's settled,
Okay.
and I'll protect you from any other negative consequence,
Okay.
by testifying. I had to testify before the Board of Pharmacy and Administrative hearings every month.
Ew.
So I testified, whatever, 100 times.
Jeez.
Uh, uh, in these administrative hearings for these people. But what I would try to do is convince them that if their negative consequence was resolved, in other words, you don't have to worry about losing your career, you don't have to worry about losing your license. If you do these things, that's settled. Now let's figure out what you really need to get better.
Oh, so you are already kind of implementing the idea, the strategy that you do now.
I was. I was. Not very successful, I would say.
Oh.
Although, uh, to this day,
Uh-huh.
I hear from pharmacists who thank me and,
Oh.
and tell me how much they were helped. I know plenty of pharmacists now who are doing well. Now, it's very possible they would have done well
Well,
anyway,
yeah,
whoever
but
was.
it's nice to hear thank you.
It is very nice. It is very nice. I see and know pharmacists practicing to this day that were helped in this program.
And so the through all of that experience, all of that that's a lot of experience doing a lot of different things.
Mm.
And so that's what led you to do the intensive?
That's right. I was doing some outcome research at UAB. That's what I studied when I was in school. That's what I
Mhm.
wrote all my papers on. Is how do you measure who's getting better and why? That's what outcome research is. And
Oh.
so, how do we know that the thing that we did, what kind of outcome it produced, and what was the factors that caused that?
Okay.
What were they? And so, I was very interested in that. And over time, we became more and more interested, and we became more and more certain that there are better ways to do treatment.
Mhm.
And so, what you've been watching as you've been growing up is us developing better treatment modeling
Mhm.
based on the best available research that we can find, and also the research that we are doing.
Okay. That's really cool. That kind of dives into what my next thing is. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about why we're doing this podcast in the first place, and kind of what we hope the listeners get out of this, and what we hope to get out of this, you and me. So, you want to start that
It's
conversation?
I have many hopes for this. It matters to me that people know that you can get better.
Mhm.
And it matters to me that we transmit every bit of information that we can about getting better
Mhm.
from this thing that we've been specializing, in for so long.
Mhm.
So that matters to me the most. And I enjoy talking to you about
Mhm.
it because it gives me a whole different perspective. You're a young professional, I'm an old professional. And so I can't really remember all the things that I need to talk about.
Hmm.
When you ask me questions and we talk about it, I think it brings out things that I have forgotten to talk about for a long time.
Mm.
That may be important and valuable,
Mhm.
and so I really enjoy getting to talk to you about it.
Well, I know that my why is one, I love hearing you talk about this stuff because you're one so passionate about it, and you know a lot. And I also, as a student, and I would call myself a baby social worker, getting into the field, being able to learn about all of this stuff from you know, someone who's been in the game in the field in a long time, and being able to have that experience as I'm entering the field and being able to see the changes, because social work, I would say social work is pretty different now than it is when you were starting out, and then through it, through your social work journey. I would say it's pretty different, because a lot of the things that we're taught to say and not say and do and not do, I would say, were not as either talked about, were either said to do and are said, like, okay, we learned that's not a good thing to do. And I've just seen that there are some things that don't end up, like, when you put it into real practice, they look slightly different when you put them into practice. And it's just been very interesting to see that. And then there's some things where I'm like, oh, this, I think from this lesson in my course, that might be a good thing to implement in practice, that that I haven't seen y'all do. I've really interested in seeing that aspect of, like, taking that information I'm learning in the textbook and your information, and then being able to have a well-rounded, I guess, toolbox to pull from. And so I think that's one of my whys, is because the more knowledge I have from you, which you have a lot of knowledge, I can take it to compare stuff in my school toolbox and see, you know, how do I make it better? How do I combine them? How do I, how can I make what I learned at school, use what you've taught me, and then be a better social worker? As I think the thing that's really driven me to uh, do this podcast with you is because I just want to be able to learn from all aspects and all perspectives, textbook and then practicing because they're different.
Yeah, maybe we can blend the old with the new and create something even better.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. That's my hope. Because I think there are some things that are great from I guess old social work and great from the new that we can take both. So
That sounds like a great plan.
I think it's a great plan. Um, but I think that we've yapped long enough, and I'll do my little outro. So that wraps up our first episode of the Recovery Project podcast. That was incredibly nerve wracking, but super fun and hopefully interesting for the people listening. Before we go, we want to thank the Moore Institute and the Addiction Research Foundation, which we will talk about in podcast coming, for funding this podcast, and my mom, Pam, for pushing us to just upload a freaking episode. We hope you listeners stay tuned for our future conversations and chime in again. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Moore Institute and check out both our websites. We will also be trying to get our podcast on every podcast listening website. We hope everyone listening has a wonderful day or night, wherever you are. And thanks again for listening to the Recovery Project podcast.
That was fun.
Bye.